Dear students, welcome you all for our lecture series on agrochemicals and pest control. In today's episode, we are going to discuss about the topic principles and methods of pest control. Let us see introduction. Pests are unwanted plants, animals, insects, germs or other organisms that interfere with human activity. They may bite, destroy food crops, damage property or otherwise make our lives more difficult. Pest control refers to the regulation or management of a species defined as a pest, usually because it is perceived to be detrimental to a person's health, the ecology or the economy. Effective pest control requires some knowledge about the pest and its habits. The first step is to identify the pest correctly. The second step is to learn about its lifestyle. After that, you can evaluate strategies to control your pest. The number of pests in communities, on farms and pastoral stations must be controlled. Control is necessary so that people, their stock and food supplies are not destroyed or contaminated, and the health of humans is not put at unnecessary risk. Hence, in this episode, the following aspects are going to be seen: types of pest, pest identification, principles of pest control methods, and pest control failures. Let us come to the first aspect. Types of pest. Some of the important types of pests are: insect. These are important and major pests. Insects have 3 pairs of legs, 2 pairs of wings, segmented body and characteristic compound eyes and antennae. Insects are tricky and cause damage in different ways by sucking sap from plants, by biting plant pods, by boring into fruits, twigs and leaves, by attacking roots, barks and blossoms, etc. The damaging stages of different insect pests are larvae, adults and nymphs. Mites. These are creatures like insect but have soft body and 4 pairs of legs. These tiny creatures have red or pale yellow color. They suck the sap from the plant and attack the crops in huge number. Rodents. This group of pests eat away large amount of human food and also damage the crops on large scale. They are also responsible for heavy loss to stored grains on farms, in warehouses and houses. Animals. Animals like wild boar, deer, elephants, wild buffalo, jackals, monkeys and squirrels cause direct damage to crop plants. They eat away the plants and they waste huge amount of crops. Birds. Birds attack the crop plants and eat grains. Crow, parrots and sparrows are major among birds that attack the crops. Most organisms are not pests. A species may be a pest in some situations and not in others. An organism should not be considered a pest until it is proven to be one. Let us come to the second aspect, pest identification. Accurate identification is the first step in an effective pest management program. Never attempt a pest control program until you are sure of what the pest is. The more you know about the pest and the factors that influence its development and spread, the easier most cost effective and more successful your pest control will be. Correct identification of a pest allows you to determine basic information about it, including its life cycle and the time that it is most susceptible to being controlled. To identify and control pests, you need to know the physical features of the pests likely to be encountered, characteristics of the damage they cause, their development and biology, whether they are continuous, sporadic or potential pests. Now we will see the third aspect, principles of pest control. There are three principles or some combinations of them is used to control a pest. Prevention. Prevention may be a goal when the pest presence or abundance can be predicted in advance. Continuous pests by definition are usually very predictable. Sporadic and potential pests may be predictable if you know the circumstances or conditions that favor their presence as pests. Suppression. Suppression is a common goal in many pest situations. The intent is to reduce the number of pests to a level where the harm they cause is acceptable. Once a pest presence is detected and control is deemed necessary, suppression and prevention often are joint goals. The right combination of control measures can often suppress the pests already present and prevent them from building up again to a level where they are causing unacceptable harm. Eradication. Eradication is a rare goal in outdoor pest situations because it is difficult to achieve. Usually the goal is prevention and or suppression. Eradication is occasionally attempted when a foreign pest has been accidentally introduced but is not yet established in an area. Such eradication strategies often are supported by the government. The Mediterranean fruit fly, gypsy moth and fire ant control programs are examples. Eradication is a more common goal indoors. Enclosed environments usually are smaller, less complex and more easily controlled than outdoor areas. In many enclosed areas such as dwellings, schools, office buildings and healthcare, food processing and food preparation facilities, certain pests cannot or will not be tolerated. Pest monitoring. Monitoring of insect-like mollusk and vertebrate pests usually is done by trapping or by scouting. Monitoring of weed pests usually is done by visual inspection. Monitoring for microbial pests is done by looking for the injury or damage they cause. Monitoring also can include checking environmental conditions in the area. Temperature and moisture levels, especially humidity, are often important clues in predicting when a pest outbreak will occur or will hit threshold levels. Monitoring is not necessary in situations where a pest is continually present and the threshold is 0. For example, there is zero tolerance for bacteria in operating rooms and other sterile areas of healthcare facilities. In these situations, routine pest control measures are taken to eradicate any pests and to prevent pests from entering the area. Now we will see the fourth aspect, pest control methods. Once it is established that an insect is causing economic losses, it becomes necessary to control it. Control of insects and similar pests may involve any of three basic pest control objectives. Control is usually aimed at suppression of pests to a point where the presence or damage level is acceptable. Prevention and eradication are useful only in relatively small, confined areas or in programs designed to keep foreign pests out of a new area. To successfully control insects and insect-like pests, you need a thorough knowledge of their habitats, feeding habits, and life cycle stages. Environmental conditions such as humidity, temperature, and availability of food can affect the length of the life cycle by altering the growth rate of the insects. A favorable environment can shorten the time of development from egg to adult. You must carefully monitor pest populations and take management action at a time when you are most likely to succeed. Timing may be essential. For example, when you need to control an internal feeder before it enters the plant. It is particularly useful to know the life cycle stages in which the pests are most vulnerable. In the egg and pupal stages, insects generally are difficult to control because these stages are inactive. The pests are not feeding or immobile and often are in hard to reach areas such as under the ground, in cocoons or cases, and in cracks or crevices. In the late instar or adult stages, insect may be controlled with moderate success. Because of their size, the insects are easiest to see in these stages and usually are causing the most destruction. However, larger insects are often more resistant to pesticides, and adults already may have laid eggs for another generation. The early larval or nymphal stages, when the insects are small, active, and vulnerable, is when you usually can achieve the best control. Control methods used for insects and similar pests include host resistance, natural enemies, cultural control, mechanical control, sanitation, and chemical control. Host plant resistance. Host plant resistance has generally been considered one of the components of cultural method. But because of its importance, it deserves an independent status as a major method of protecting crops against insect damage. The method involves the utilization of the inherent property of certain strains or varieties of crops of being less infected or less damaged than other strains or varieties of same crop. Enormous economic benefits have been achieved by using this method in the case of crops. Example: wheat, maize, cotton, and alfalfa. Some crops, animals, and structures resist insects and similar pests better than others. Some varieties of crops and wood are immune to certain pests. Use of resistant types helps keep pest populations below harmful levels by making the environment less favorable for the pests. Natural enemies. Most insect and insect-like pests have a variety of natural predators and parasites that help keep their numbers in check. If these natural enemies of the insect you need to control are already present in the area, you may be able to make use of them. If you use pesticides, try to use ones that are not toxic to the predators and parasites you want to encourage, or apply the pesticides at a time when the beneficial organisms are not vulnerable. Used to control fleas, cockroaches, and fire ants, the pest populations slowly decline over several weeks. Since they are unable to reproduce, juvenile hormones are seldom used in agriculture because a quick kill is usually desired. Cultural control. This is a preventive method which is inexpensive and may prove more effective and efficient if employed after acquiring a thorough knowledge of the life history and habits of a pest. Deep plowing after harvesting the crop, the removing and destroying of the suitable and other trash, adjusting the time of sowing, clean cultivation, the removal of alternative wild hosts, catch crops and suitable rotations are some of the important measures included under this method of control. Mechanical control. This is one of the oldest methods and has been in use since time immemorial. It includes measures like collection of egg mosses and other inactive stages, the removal of infested parts or whole plants, the beating of drums or tins or trenching. This method can prove to be effective during the initial stage of the pest incidence and when practiced as a concerted effort by a large number of farmers in a particular area. Mechanical controls used on insects and similar pests include screens and other barriers, traps, light and heat and cold. Sanitation. Tilling fields and burning crop residues soon after harvest greatly aid in the control of some insect. Removing litter from around building helps control pests that use it for breeding or shelter. Ants, termites and some other indoor pests may be suppressed by using this technique. Sanitation is important in the control of animal parasites and filth flies. Fly control in and around barns, poultry houses and livestock pens, for example, is greatly aided by proper manure management. Chemical control. Chemical control is the use of pesticides. In integrated pest management, pesticides are used only when needed and in combination with other approaches for more effective long-term control. Also, pesticides are selected and applied in a way that minimizes their possible harm to people and the environment. Some problems with insects, mites, spiders and nematodes can best be managed with the use of chemicals. Chemicals such as insecticides, acaricides and molluscicides are used to control these pests. Mode of action. Most of these pesticides either repel the pests or poison them. Repellents keep pests away from an area or from a specific host. Products designed to keep mosquitoes, chiggers and ticks off people are an example. Poisons act on one or more life systems in the pest. Stomach poisons must be eaten by the pest. Contact poisons act when the pest touches them. A few insecticides kill insects by interfering mechanically with their body functions. For example, mineral oils suffocate insects. Silica dusts destroy their body water balance by damaging their protective wax covering. Persistence. Insecticides and related chemicals vary in the length of time they remain active after they are applied. Some kill the pest they contact at the time of application and then break down almost immediately. These are non-persistent pesticides. Others, known as persistent or residual pesticides, remain active for varying periods of time after they are applied. The active pesticide residue that these products leave behind gives continued protection against pests that may enter the area after the application is completed. Applying insecticides. Thorough knowledge of the target pest helps determine what chemicals to use and how often to apply them. One well-timed application of an effective pesticide may provide the desired control. Sometimes repeated applications will be necessary as the infestation continues and pesticide residues break down. The pesticide label, extension service recommendations and other sources such as pesticide dealers usually indicate a range of treatment intervals and dosages. By carefully observing the pest problem and applying chemicals when the pests are most vulnerable, you often will be able to use lower doses of pesticides and apply them less often. Over a long growing period, this can mean considerable savings in time, money, and total pesticides applied. Let us come to the fifth aspect, pest control failures. Sometimes you may find that even though you applied a pesticide, the pest has not been controlled. You should review the situation to try to determine what went wrong. There are several possible reasons for the failure of chemical pest control. Pest resistance. Pesticides fail to control some pests because the pests are resistant to the pesticides. Consider this when planning pest control programs that rely on the use of pesticides. Rarely does any pesticide kill all the target pests. Each time a pesticide is used, it selectively kills the most susceptible pests. Some pests avoid the pesticide, others withstand its effects. Pests that are not destroyed may pass along to their offspring the triad that allowed them to survive. When one pesticide is used repeatedly in the same place against the same pest, the surviving pest population may be more resistant to the pesticide than the original population was. A pesticide that leaves a residue that gradually loses its effectiveness over time will help select out resistance. Rotating pesticides may help reduce the development of pest resistance. Other reasons for failure. Not every pesticide failure is caused by the pest resistance. Make sure that you have used the correct pesticide and the correct dose and that you have applied it correctly. Sometimes a pesticide application fails to control a pest because the pest was not identified correctly and the wrong pesticide was chosen. Other applications fail because the pesticide was not applied at an appropriate time. The pest may not have been in the area during the application, or it may have been in a life cycle stage or location where it was not susceptible to the pesticide. Also remember that the pests that are present may be a part of new infestation that developed after the chemical was applied. Let us come to conclusion. Control is usually aimed at suppression of pests to a point where the presence or damage level is acceptable. Prevention and eradication are useful only in relatively small confined areas or in programs designed to keep foreign pests out of a new area. This is all about the topic principle and methods of pest control. So, students, hope you enjoyed this session. We will meet in the next episode. Thank you.